I'm going to ask you straight, you know, do you think this is a racist country?
Could I ask you a question instead? When England lose, why does racism come to surface?
I think...
Why didn't it come when we beat Germany 2-0?
Do you know what? If the internet had existed when Gareth Southgate missed back in 1996, he would have received all sorts of verbal abuse, pointing out every facial feature or height feature. Or, I mean, look, I think the internet's a bit of a sewer, and I think that a lot of those tweets and messages came from overseas, possibly some from agents provocateurs. Are there a few morons that say terrible things? Yeah, you know, ask any pop singer, ask anybody who's in the public domain and they're criticised for their hair colour, for their skin colour, for their whatever it may be. It's a horrible, horrible place. What I hate is the idea that that is somehow reflective of us as a country as a whole, or sport as a whole, because I just don't believe it.
Well, the thing is, right, what was disappointing about it all was that it was so predictable. You know, we had the three of the penalty takers, they missed it, and they kind of like... you kind of expected that something like that would surface, you know, of the abuse. And you obviously, you're in the view that, you know, England isn't kind of, you know, racist. And I think what my opinion is that when we see something like this, we beat Germany first time in 55 years in a major global tournament since 1966. And it still wasn't enough for the fans to, you know, that's not right.
There are 70 million people in this country.
Yeah.
If a couple of hundred said nasty things, should we judge the rest of the country on what a couple of hundred people do?
But I think what my point is that they shouldn't do that. It's not right.
No one's arguing they should, but it's about scale. That's the point I'm making, I think.
But the thing is, it takes only a few words of these kind of comments, and then suddenly, you know, people have a different image about England. And, you know, we saw some of the, you know, footages on, after the game with some of the fans. You may even say there were a few hundred fans. But we don't want, you know, England to be in a position when it comes to 2030 to bid for the World Cup. Well, and then the UEFA and FIFA say, oh, by the way, a few hundred fans.
The way Wembley was organised, I was there for the final, it was such a complete shambles that before we bid for the World Cup, we must have an inquiry into what went wrong. We have to come clean, don't we, and say that we have actually had a drink together before.
Well, I'd say many a time and off, but I was, you know, pretty much on the opposing side of you. You know, politically, Nigel, you've got to admit it. You were pro-Brexit, I was anti-Brexit. I've got to say you won, and I accepted my, you know, my punishment like a man.
I think what was interesting, even when that whole Brexit debate, and it got pretty bloody, you know, I mean, you could say it was bloody in the... By the way, cheers. Cheers. This is lager. I normally drink bitter, but...
By the way, I love the joke, talking pints.
Yeah.
Probably in Northern Ireland, you say pints anyway, you see. Anyway, we just had
that's all I get it.
We just had Arlene Foster on the show.
No. You had, at the time, on the GLC, and in particular, in councils like Lambeth, you know, Red Ted Knight, Linda Bellos. I mean, this was pretty hard left stuff, wasn't it?
Well, not really. I mean, if you look back, I got elected to be the GLC leader, to cut the fares, to build more council housing. I mean, I had no idea. I mean, I've never read Marx, you know. I came into politics to do things. But I was immediately demonised as this mad trot.
Whether you were the mad trot or not, the point I'm making is the Labour Party in London had plenty of mad trots, didn't it?
Well, don't forget, we'd had the Wilson government of the 1960s, which had actually really failed to deliver on all its promises. And so when that was defeated, there was a surge of new, mainly young people coming in, wanted to get a better Labour Party. And a lot of them were on, you know, a small minority were trots, yeah. Most were broadly on the left, but there were some on the right.
You should take the advice of the health ministers and the scientists, and we're being told the vaccine is going to help us, and they're spreading it through the different ages, as you know now, because getting more and more youngsters because of the nightclubs having it done. I think we've just got to take their advice on it. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, I think that if we didn't have the jab now, I wouldn't be here now, wouldn't have been at Wembley the other day.
You were there, were you? I was there too. Gove, you know, today, not sounding like a Conservative, sounding like a sort of old-style Stalinist statist. I mean, it's all quite worrying, isn't it?
Well, Michael's trying to do the best. I mean, we don't quite know where all this is going, but the government is trying to do its best. And I'm not in the government, but my goodness, I'm quite glad sometimes when some of these decisions are having to be made. The one thing I will say, and I've spoken to Boris Johnson about this, he doesn't like any of these restrictions, none whatsoever. He doesn't want us to have COVID passports.
But why? So why are we having them?
Because he's the leader, Nigel. Because he's getting all this advice from the so-called experts, and if it goes wrong, it's not you, it's not me, it's him that will take the buck.
Just as it was you in Bosnia.
Yeah,
that's what leadership. As a country, we seem to want to beat ourselves up. We seem to want to apologise for everything that's in our history. There is an attempt to make us all think that we're terrible people, that we should be guilty about the empire. I mean, there's a certain negativity from the British about themselves. We're trying to convince our kids that if they're white, they have white privilege, that this is an inherently racist country. How did you find it when you first came here 30 years ago?
I never found it any different from living in Bombay. Yes, a lot of people did in the restaurant because they said, how did you learn to speak English so quickly? I said, my dear sir, I come from the world's largest English-speaking country. And I was educated on the Cambridge Education Board. My papers were corrected in Cambridge, not in India.
Right.
At that time when I passed my examinations. But, but never actually racist in the sense that you were ostracized or you were made to feel small. I think I'm lucky I didn't come across that, if at all that did exist in a big way.
Interesting, yeah.
And we've never felt it. Yes, there are pockets of it which you do come across. But I always have compared that to ignorance, not to anything else. Okay. Because in every society, no matter how educated you are, or how affluent you are, or how advanced a culture is, there is ignorance amongst the ranks. And that ignorance erupts every now and again in different ways. And it is made to look, it's different, it's never going to change. And if you're looking at the word racism, Nigel, very clearly, I come from a land which is riddled with racism.
That's what this is the point. Because of the divisions.
The divisions, the color. The color. I mean, within my own family, my aunt, my cousin is much darker skinned than we are. We are from Persian origin, so our skin tone is different. But she didn't like her son because he was dark. It destroyed his life. It destroyed his future. It destroyed everything. Why? Because he should have been fairer. Now, this is within a family and a mother's reaction to her son. Okay, so I think the British public should clear it from their brains and their minds that they are inherently racist. When things happen in history, they happen for different reasons. They happen for different purposes. They were used, yes, no doubt about it. Yeah. People were used to feed a hunger that was a growing economy. Yeah. It's very different. But you still have the best friends between the British and the Indians as well.
Well, I think we do as well. No, I agree with you.
And people accept you. Okay, there will be comments. And we pass racist comments all the time between friends. My children get very upset. Dad, how can you speak like that? I said, you know what? We grew up like that. We don't consider it racist.
Yeah, because it's, I mean, words and teasing, and that's the sort of thing you're talking about. Yeah. You're not a fan of Sadiq, and I get that, and I understand that. You stood against him. I have to say, Shaun, I'd met you before. I liked you. I thought you stood for some very good principles. You don't want us all to be divided up into our different groups. You want us to come together as one community. And you and I talked about that at length, and I respected you for it. When the final votes came through, after the second preferences, and there you were on 45%, I mean, it was a hell of a good performance. And why did the Conservative Party, you had your friends and supporters around you, but why did the Conservative Party not help you? I mean, does Boris Johnson have a problem with you?
I think you have to break it up into what it is. Fortunately for me, Boris is my guy. I remember when they were saying we're going to deselect Shaun, all this nonsense. Boris rang me personally. He said, forget the bugger, Shaun. I won't use the exact language. He said, forget the bugger, Shaun. I'm on your side. Yeah. Tell me who I need to go and rough up because they tried this on me. You're my guy.
But they weren't giving you any money, were they?
But they never give anybody any money. The idea that
I've seen the money that they've raised over the last 2 years.
Well, listen, I had to raise my own money. That is true.
Tens of millions.
But so did everybody else. But the thing here's the real thing. It wasn't the party per se who didn't support me. For instance, I was selected by the members, one of my proudest moments, because they had a choice. They selected me, they backed me all the way.
Is this the racist Conservative Party?
Exactly, and they really did have a choice. But what's interesting is the press wrote me off. Some of the time, people they'll say London is a Labour city. It is not. The press in London are very Labour dominated.
Can the Tories win it back?
Yes, they can, and I'll tell you why they can win it back. My result showed me that people are beginning to tire of the stuff they're being fed. People are beginning to challenge it. I remember a black guy stopped in the street, Rasta, and he said to me, "You're that Tory boy," and I said, "Yeah." He said, "Man, I might have to vote Tory," which for him was a big step. So I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because we're not having a realistic conversation about the challenges that he's talking about, the black community face." Every time someone bigged me and said, "Go on, Shaun," you'd hear some form of working class accent. You'd hear someone who, in my parlance, has to work for a living. There is a groundswell of people in London who just want to have a practical conversation about their needs, not be told that they're racist, sexist or any other ist because they don't agree with the sort of zeitgeist. They just want London to work.
Lockdown was never on any pandemic plans before. And an epidemic and a coronavirus epidemic were very high up on the national risk register, and there was never a plan to lock down. As Neil Ferguson said in a quite extraordinary interview with The Times, they thought, we couldn't do that, could we? And then we thought, yes, we can, because they did it in Italy. So we import this totalitarian, brand new tool, and political leaders thought, how will we get people to comply? The reason we know they thought like this is because of the minutes of a SPI-B meeting. That's the Scientific Pandemic Influenza Group on Behaviour. The question is, how do we make people follow the lockdown rules? There are various answers. There's a suite of options, and one is to raise people's sense of personal threat, because people understood that they weren't at risk in their demographic, and they wanted everybody to feel at risk to comply with the rules.
And they succeeded with this, did they?
They did succeed with it. I mean, we know in May, for instance, that 3/4 of people were too scared to go to hospital in case they caught COVID. So, I mean, one of the tenets of my book is that fear creates collateral damage. It creates harms in itself. And we can see now the knock-on effects in waiting lists, in late treatment for oncology and heart disease, that people being scared to go to hospital because the threat and the fear being amplified causes collateral damage.
But equally, the hospitals weren't fully operational for other procedures, and we're 5.3 million operations behind. We have, waiting lists. I mean, I completely understand what you're saying.
Bluntly, the prestige of the House of Commons has gone down. I mean, whether it was expenses or before that, all the sort of John Major era of the sleaze of one sort or another, all those things, I think, have altered the tenor of it. The other thing that's happened, bluntly, is, I mean, it's very, very visible at the moment, but the changes to the rules and so on, I mean, actually the House has less influence and less power than it used to have. I mean, at the moment, it's ridiculous. It's like a parish council at the moment.
And that's because power's been centralised more and more.
Yeah. I mean, every act of Parliament now that goes through is what they call programmed. Now, there's a guillotine, So, you can get 3 minutes. But now, you may be used to 3 minutes
in the European Parliament. That was good.
That's precisely what you got. But, if you've got big issue to fight over, you need 10 minutes at least to talk about whether we should bomb Syria, or whether we should go into Afghanistan. Or, you can't do that in 3 minutes, And also, the people who had experience, the ex-cabinet ministers, the people who had maybe served in the forces and so on, they get a bit longer at the beginning. Now it's much, much more sort of tick box, so many minutes each. And it does rather force, and I don't blame my colleagues for this, but it does rather force them to a circumstance of sort of giving the local press release in their speech rather than making a very...
Because the power of debate, isn't it? And this happens in Parliament, and I'm a great believer that every pub's a Parliament. Well, no, I really mean it, because people come together and you listen to different points of view, and you say, well, do you know what? I've never thought of it like that. Trying to inspire kids.
Now, right, so my very first interview in the Army was in 1987 with a guy called Major Finclair, and he asked me what I wanted out of life. And I said to him, sir, I want a great time in the Army. I want to do some really cool stuff. And when I get out of the military, I want to help other people who come from a similar background to myself, i.e. from the children's homes and stuff, and I want to help them have a great time. I've expanded that slightly. I want every kid to have an opportunity in life to go and do cool stuff and be part of society and have a great life. Okay, and I'm now the head ambassador for the Army Cadet Force.
Yep.
It's the jewel in my crown. Kids have had a tough time. Kids are having an extremely tough time. You know, COVID's beat them up.
Can't go to school, can't see their mates.
Yeah, so they've had a really tough time. So organisations, you know, like people go, oh, but it's an army. It's not the Army. No, it's not. The Army Cadet Force is about delivering youth into adulthood with some skill sets that they don't learn at school. If then one decides he wants to join the Army, well, fair play to him, well done, great career waiting for you, son. But if he doesn't, or she doesn't, off you go. But you're now a first aider, you've now got some leadership skills, and if I was an employer in Civvy Street and somebody said, well, oh, he's got a gold D.V., or he's been in the Army Cadets, or he made the rank of Sergeant Major, oh, we've got someone special here, do you know what I mean? He might have 6... GCSEs or whatever.
So was recruitment for cadets pre-pandemic? I mean, how was that going?
It was going. I think it's going okay, and they kept the flame alive. More importantly, through the pandemic, we did a lot of stuff online. We did a lot of Zoom stuff. You know, wherever we could, we made sure that we didn't lose them because it was so easy to lose people during the pandemic, wasn't it? And all right, I know that they're watching me now, and I know there was people on them Zoom calls in their underpants with their uniform on. All right, you can't escape from Big Phil.
Well, there was a newsreader from a rival TV organisation was caught with a suit.
Yeah, I can imagine. You know.
I was there. I was there early this year, and I could see they had movers' advantage because they got their side of the story out first.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's very tough for the Queen or anybody else to respond.
And they shouldn't have... I mean, really, you know, the work that the Queen's done with the Commonwealth and the work that the Prince of Wales has done with a huge amount of work, and to even implicate them as racist is ludicrous. It's absolutely
I hated it. And the other thing that really upset me, Robert, was when they gave that interview to Oprah, they knew that the Duke of Edinburgh was on his deathbed.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
Yet they still went ahead.
I was shocked by that, actually. I thought it was deeply unpleasant, actually, the whole way it was handled. But, you know, I said on air that I thought it was a bit like someone burning the American flag. What they were doing is burning the British flag. And the nonsense that was talked about, you know, they had a secret marriage. The Archbishop of Canterbury, the most holy man of the land, actually came out and said it was a lie. So, and it never happened. You had other things that were in there that were just nonsense. I mean, and so I thought that Oprah, more than anybody, let herself down by not actually calling them to account, and I think that was poor.
Well, yeah, when Harry came on for part 2, he contradicted things that Meghan had said in part 1, and Oprah...
But it's still out there now. They still think the royal family is racist, and they still think that these things were said, and I think it's pretty poor for us, and I think it's going to be difficult, actually,
but there's no way back
members of the royal family to go over to America. I mean, you know, it's all going to be about Harry and Meghan. When before you were doing business with the great special relationship and trying to build relations with America, big trading partners, it's all going to be about them.
Despite everything, the fact that you said, I'm the luckiest man alive, means you've come out of this experience still with a positive attitude towards life.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose you learn a lot through age, and I won't necessarily run down the road of wisdom, but you learn a lot, and you learn a lot about yourself, and it's the people who come into your life. But I've always lived by a simple philosophy. It's not so much about what happens in your life, it's more about what you do about it, what you're prepared to do about it that counts. Because, as you say, you've had nasty knocks, you've had bumps, but you still have to go on. You know, you've only got 2 ways to go. You either die or you get on with it. So, and it's what you make of that bad job. And I was told by a young paratrooper who was in hospital with me, and I said to him, Grant, I said, how do you cope? I said, he was younger than me, he was only 18, and he'd lost his leg, and there was a potential he might lose his other. And he went, hell, just make the best of a bad job. And I just took that philosophy to heart, really. Just make the best of a bad job.
Was this on because there was like a troop ship that...
No, it was in Woolwich Hospital, Queen Elizabeth Military in Woolwich, when we were wise enough to still have military hospitals.
I know. They all got closed, didn't they? Which was pretty crazy. Are we going to sort out Northern Ireland? Because if we don't, I do fear the knock-on for the rest of the Union's quite significant.
Northern Ireland is a fundamental part of our country. Northern Ireland is as much part of our country.
But it was.
As Somerset. No, it was. It still is. And you cannot allow the European Union to extract Northern Ireland from the United Kingdom. And you're right to say that the EU has not implemented what it agreed with the goodwill that we had a reasonable expectation could apply. It has not applied the flexibilities. It has not even recognised animals in the UK as being from the safest countries of all. And as the problem with rabies has always been the continent to us rather than us.
And she threatened us with that. She threatened to put the hard border back, and we know all of that. But does there come a point when we have to say, look, you've been completely unreasonable about this?
The British government is completely committed to ensuring that Northern Ireland remains a fundamental part of our United Kingdom. Lord Frost is, as you said earlier, a tough negotiator. The British government is going to ensure that Northern Ireland is, protected.
There is work to be done.
There is work to be done, and it needs to be done at a sensible pace, and we need to try... You and I both want a relationship with the EU which is one of goodwill, and we want to get to that. But we need to understand, and you probably understand it better than I do because of being an MEP and perhaps being more intimately involved, that they feel very hurt still with us and are very angry with us, and there is still... Yes?
Oh, yeah.
And it is in our interest in the long term to have a friendly relationship with the EU. So we want to ensure that Northern Ireland is protected,
but at the moment, it's not being protected. No, I mean, this is work in progress. Jacob, one last thing to discuss with you before we're out of time. When I said you were coming on earlier, a lot of people said, Jacob Rees-Mogg, where's he gone? I mean, we had Mogmentum, we had this... There was a movement that suggested that Jacob could quite possibly become the leader of the Conservative Party, and what Jacob thought and what Jacob said on every issue was covered by all the newspapers from left to right, and we got to find out your views and your strong Christian faith and how you won't be bullied on social issues, and we learned all of those things. And this potential leader, and you've disappeared. You're leader of the House. You make some witty remarks in the House, and that's all well and good, and the business of the House of Commons is very important. But, Jacob, you've disappeared.
Well, I'm here.
Well, I'm very pleased you are, but we haven't seen you doing interviews. We haven't seen... I mean, have they bought you off with this position, Leader of the House?
No, in government, as you know, you're bound by collective responsibility.
Yes.
And you have your area of responsibility, and other ministers have theirs. My area of responsibility is the business of the House of Commons, the government's
but your fans want to see you, Jacob.
I'm delighted to come on your programme, and hope you will invite me back again.
Well, there we are. We've got Jacob Rees-Mogg. He's turned up with his own cider, and I think if he drinks a few more of those, maybe we'll see a lot more of him. I want to thank Jacob Rees-Mogg for coming in for Talking Pints.
In particular, seeing the protests that were going on in the UK about racism and Black Lives Matter, an organisation that is not for Black Americans. It's an organisation that raised billions and billions of dollars, of which zero...
But it says it is.
Yeah. Billions and billions of dollars from white people that feel guilty and believe that there's, racial oppression in America for Black Americans because the media tells them so. And, of course, the media never lies. Nigel, as you know, the media never, ever lies. And what it does is it funds white people. The money never goes to Black America, so... billions of dollars raised for Black Lives Matter. Not a single Black school built, not a single Black building built up, not a Black neighborhood that was built up. But many more Black people arrested and sent to prison in these riots. More Black people died in these Black Lives Matter riots. But at least the white people felt good when they gave the dollar to Black Lives Matter. So it's a political scam.
But there are a lot of poor Black people in America.
There's a lot of poor white people in America. There's a lot of poor people, period. And there's definitely such a thing as economic privilege. There's no white privilege. America is a country that no matter where you come from, you can make something great of yourself if you're willing to work hard and stay out of trouble. And unfortunately, right now, there's this idea that if you are Black, you can't become successful in America. And part of that is a racist idea, by the way.
This is the victim.
This is the victim mentality, and it's cancerous, right? Because if you keep telling somebody that they're a victim and that they are, stuck inside of this idea of being a victim, then they become their own oppressor. When you believe that you are a victim, you become your own oppressor, right? Because you say, why should I try? I'm Black. And my story is very much, I came from nothing. My mother didn't even graduate high school. My family grew up very poor, and I made it in America because I had a grandparents who never handed me an excuse. You just got to get up and you have to work.
We were told in 1989 we had 10 years to save the planet, right? Mm-hmm. We were then told in sort of 2005 or so that the North Pole would be gone in 7 years. It's still blooming there. And now we get another report from these people telling us the end of the world is not. Can you understand?
Well, interestingly enough...
Can you understand why a lot of us think you're crying wolf?
Well, interestingly enough, my position, if you want to know what my position is that they're underestimating the severity of the crisis. So that's interesting, isn't it? Because
what do you base that on?
OK, so there was an article in The Conversation, like you can look it up on the website. It had 3 of the world's leading scientists, and they said that in 2015 at the Paris conference, none of the scientists believed that staying under 1.5 is going to be feasible. So for the last 6 years, this whole global conversation about staying under 1.5 has been rubbish, because in so much as we're going to believe, several thousand of the world's leading scientists, it's not going to happen. And the reason it's not going to happen is because we've already got these increases locked in. And you can look at peer-reviewed papers. I mean, Andrew, when I was last on, was saying, where's the peer-reviewed papers? I've got a peer-reviewed paper for you.
But you're basing everything. This is the crazy part of this. You're basing everything on man's production of carbon dioxide, right? I don't hear you say anything positive about planting trees. I don't hear... I was watching today, Surfers Against Sewage. And by the way, I'm an environmentalist. I have been all my life. I genuinely am. Surfers Against Sewage today, they're going down onto Devon and Cornwall beaches and clearing the place up. They're doing something positive. I don't hear anything from you guys about tree planting programmes, about things we could do, peat bogs or whatever it may be, to start absorbing carbon dioxide, if that's what we're worried about. All I hear about is stopping us living normal Western lives. It's kind of a sort of Cromwellian Puritanism that you want. I mean, you're smiling, which I'm very pleased. I wasn't sure whether you chaps ever smiled, really. But can you see what I'm saying? There's nothing positive
I totally see what you're saying, and you've got very good reasons to think that the environmental movement historically has interfered with what you might call the traditional way of life in this country. Business people want to get on and make money. People don't want red tape. I know what your position is, right?
Well, I want a balance, a sensible balance.
A sensible balance, right? And you've got good reason for opposing that. Let's say, for the sake of argument. The argument I'm coming on your show to say is it's actually changed. Now, we know when a situation changes. Now, you can debate whether it has changed, but sometimes something changes, and you have to radically change course. In other words, what the situation is at the moment, right, from this point on, is we're in an emergency. Now, when you're in an emergency, you have to change the whole way you approach something. In other words, like traditionally, environmentalism was saying, no, we don't want the free market and what have you. The situation now is if you don't intervene to stop the emission of carbon, right, you're going to destroy the economy, right? This is the critical flip point which people like you, I hope, will engage with. That's why I'm coming on to talk to you. It's not like I'm opposed to your point of view necessarily. That's pretty irrelevant. What I'm trying to say is look at the science. In other words, look at the real world.
So the emergency, OK. You believe
if the real world is saying
there's all sorts. There's all sorts of opinions on this, and let's face it, heavy volcanic activity will put far more CO2 into the atmosphere than man ever can. And we don't know whether that's going to happen next Wednesday or whether it's going to happen in 100 years' time. We just don't know, but we know that's true. But Roger Hallam, if you're serious in saying that your activists are going to try and effectively stop London from operating, that we have to move to net zero by 2025. You literally are telling us to virtually live in caves. Reports of hundreds of thousands of Uyghurs being put through retraining camps, and you don't quite agree with that narrative, do you?
I think the use of the word genocide is not right here. There is terrible human rights abuse in many countries of minorities. And China is one of them, and they have abused those minorities, for sure. But calling it genocide, I think, is, hyping the language.
OK. Even your detractors would say, that Boycott, actually, at the end of the over, when he gives analysis...
I know the game.
He knows the game.
I know the game.
Why are you not on the BBC, Geoffrey? No, it's a serious question. I mean, who knows more about batting in Test matches than you?
I think it was getting to the point where the political correctness was more important than whether you were expert at cricket, put it that way. Does that sum it up for you?
Well, it does. It's remarkably reserved for you, though.
Yes. Well, when you're not working with something, you don't want to be trashing it, do you?
No, I get that.
No, I just think, yes, it was getting that way.
Yeah.
And it's sad.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody should be equal. Men and women, race, colour. It should be about ability. There's a shade of white fear. We don't talk about it anymore. We may talk in private, but you say it publicly, the media will crucify you and so forth, because it's a good story. But actually, it's getting like that, and it's sad, really. It should be equality for everyone. I think that's what the law was, isn't it?
It's supposed to be. Yeah, it's supposed to be.
I mean, I know women were treated badly, and sometimes, you know, but now I thought it was equality on ability. And
we seem to be, rather than going for equality, we're sort of dividing people up into separate groups, and I find that worrying.
I am tired of announcements coming out of the Home Office almost every 5 seconds. Pretty announces a new policy. And yet what's happened to the ones she's announced before? Where are they? You know, where is the action? And I did say on another programme, you know, it reminds me of the famous epitaph, "Here lies our sovereign lord the king, whose word no man relied on. He never said a foolish thing, and he never did a wise one." That's this government.
Is Boris that bad a leader?
I think he's weak. I think he's hopelessly weak. I think his instinct's actually libertarian. If you remember right back at the beginning of this pandemic, when he was asked why he was only making staying at home advisory and not compulsory, he said, "Oh, it's a land of liberty." Well, he doesn't say that now, does he? I mean, liberty has gone out of the window. And I think he's a weak leader, but he's at least 100 times as strong as Keir Starmer. So I suppose we ought to be grateful for that.
I mean, Mrs. Thatcher, of course, was there in '87 in an enormously powerful position, and you've seen it all the way through John Major and Tony Blair and of course Michael Howard, who you're something of the night about him, did seem to rather stick with Michael Howard and didn't do him a lot of good. I mean, who's the best leader you've seen?
Oh, I think undeniably Thatcher, though I do think John Major was underestimated. Now, we may have differences with him over Europe, but I do think that as a Prime Minister, he was underestimated, and I think the judgment of future historians may be rather different from that of contemporary commentators.
Alan, I mean, I'm amazed. So much success, and yet everyone laughs at you.
No, they don't.
Don't they?
No. But listen, one of my favourite memories of you, Nigel, is when we met in Bradford West.
Yep.
Do you remember when George Galloway won the seat?
I do.
Yes. And you came and you visited me in my party headquarters, the new Bird's Nest.
Yep.
My party headquarters.
Yep.
And I've got this for you, and I'm going to present this to you now. Take a look at this.
Make Bradford bonkers. Oh, that's fantastic.
This is Nigel Farage, folks. Being a loony. Look.
Well, I did. I have to say thank you for that. And I do also remember after the election. There we are. This was me nearly defecting to the Looney Party.
Nearly?
It was very close. It was nip and tuck.
Let me tell you something else now, Nigel. You've always said to me, if you weren't involved in Brexit and UKIP, whatever, if you weren't ever involved with them, the only party ever joined would be the Looney Party.
Well, of course, there's no question about that. There's no question.
You've told me that many times.
Of course,
and you've told many other people too.
Of course, no, I'm not denying it for a moment, Alan. Of course, I'm not. Now, we've had guys doing a tremendous job under very extreme pressure, and there are 7,000 amputees from the Afghanistan conflict, 457 dead. And I know that you worked in security in Kabul. You know Afghanistan a little bit. How do you feel about the way this has all ended?
I listened to a lot of people. I listened to Ben Parkinson the other day on TV.
Who's a multiple amputee, isn't he?
Yeah. He was the most seriously injured guy in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Given very little chance of anything. Ben is a tremendous guy. And where it's come to now from them, I was with the charity, Pilgrim Bandage Charity, for 6 years as ambassador, working with Ben Parkinson and the other amputees. If it wasn't for the charities and their support, like anything else, they seem to think, the ones I've spoken to lately, that they've been totally betrayed of what's happened, and it'll be like, you know, like the stuff that's gone on before. It's like Northern Ireland, how their veterans, you know, the veterans and amputees.
So do we not look after our veterans properly?
No. I mean, I'm on it all the time. Today I've been down to see the Gurkhas, you know, and they've finished their hunger strike today. But I went down to see them, taken some pictures with them, had a chat to them, but it's only postponed, you know that. It's not finished. It's postponed until Billy Liar, 3 months' time in December. Sorry about that. But in December, it's going to be looked at again.
And they want fair pensions.
Well, why not?
No.
These guys have served this country, and I've worked with them. I've trained Nepalese Special Forces. I know what they're capable of doing, and I've worked with them. But people don't want to do that. Once they finish the job, it's like, give them some money, throw them in a corner.
And we also have veterans living rough on the streets. I mean, there are some real problems here, aren't there? Is this whole, you know, post-traumatic stress disorder, is this part of what's going wrong?
The thing is, when you leave the military, they're not really that interested. What they do is that you walk out the door, you go for a medical somewhere, you'll find out there's something wrong. But because the charities are taking care of it, they've got them on the street for definite. You know, I'm also a patron of Homeless Veterans Charity up in Scotland.
Okay, good for you, yeah.
Veteran 180, I'm a patron for them, and I'm a patron for the VC Trust. This is what I do.
It keeps you busy, then?
Well, not busy enough not to see you, Nigel.
Well, I'm delighted that you're here, you know. And you were, as a young man, a very keen footballer.
Yeah, I was very keen. I represent the British Army in the end of the day, which is as high as you could go in semi-professional football, because I had a career in the Army. But as a 5'2" runt, when I came in, I just wanted to play for Liverpool, but you know what, I was never going to make that.
And Rusty, so life now, you're living down in some beautiful part of Devon, I think, aren't you?
I've just moved, Nigel.
Yeah.
We're up in the Wirral.
Because you were on Dartmoor, weren't you, I think, at one point? Yeah.
Spent 9 years there.
Yeah.
Solitary confinement. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was down there for 9 years, yeah.
But once a soldier, always a soldier?
Well, I can't stop supporting what's going on, Nigel, because until we push it into, you know, we've got a national security advisor, haven't we? Lovegrove. Where's he been? I haven't seen anything from him. You know why? He hasn't got a security background. And he's a national security advisor. So Boris Johnson then have to ask him questions.
Wow. Didn't take long to get you into fighting spirit, did it?
No.
Thank you for joining us here. That was Rusty Firmin, and still the warrior is not very far below the surface. Brexit, where we are today, it's not perfect with Northern Ireland, with fisheries, but we do actually, to a large degree, have got back the ability to run our lives now, don't we?
Well, I completely disagree.
Do you?
No, I didn't take part in the referendum campaign. I didn't vote in the referendum.
Right.
I thought that we should have taken the Norway option. I thought that the referendum was designed to save the Conservative Party rather than the country. I think that was its,
it was offered
its whole purpose, and I think that
originally, yeah,
that's what it has ended up doing.
But we could have gone for the Norway option once we'd had the vote, couldn't we? But we didn't.
We didn't, because the campaign to leave the European Union, which was originally a campaign of people who loved this country and wanted to retain and restore its institutions and independence, was taken over by a bunch of piratical free traders who want nothing of that kind. They simply want to take this country out of the European Union and plunge us into a world of completely, as far as I see, unrestrained free trade, in which instead of being dominated by Brussels, we get pushed around by China. I don't really see it as much of a swap myself.
Well, we can make our own laws, we can regulate our own industries,
up to the point.
We can control. Well, yes, of course, there are global standards, and if you want to sell a good to America, you've got to meet with their laws, and I understand that. But so you didn't vote for Brexit, didn't participate in the referendum. Do you ever vote for anybody anymore?
I haven't for a long time, no, because I decided that the important thing, the most important task for anybody who's seriously concerned with this country, was the destruction of the Conservative Party. which is the great block which stands across the actual path of any kind of conservative reform, of doing all the things that really need to be done, the moral, social, family things, the educational things, the criminal justice things which need to be done, which the Tory party has for many, many years not been interested in.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.